So this is about why the playbook is dead. And it's a conversation about why we can't continue to do the things that we've done or the ways that we've done it in the past. One would argue in the 20th century it worked really well, right? We were able to build successful businesses. We were able to grow and scale around the world. We were able to build these extraordinary brands. And then something shifted. And actually many things have shifted. And there's a real reason that we can't do it the same way anymore, and why we also need an accompanying different way to think about leadering or management or what we call leadership in the past. So quickly, we'll just review what those shifts are, and then we'll hear from several of folks who are trying to help us navigate our way through. So the way I describe it is that there's at least, again, like I say, 5 things, right? The first is escalating expectations from our shoppers and our users of our products and services who are continuously asking for more and more and more. And even the way that it's not as the list is getting longer, it's also what it means to deliver that. So when we think about what personalization meant 5 years ago versus what it means now versus what it will mean 5 years into the future, as new technologies allow us to, deliver that in even new and different ways. So the fact is that it's going to continuously push us to up our game. It's also that we're shifting now from short-term thinking, hopefully, to long-term thinking. I think that shift has just started, and I think that will continue to put not much pressure, actually, but hopefully more vision into our organizations and allow us to deliver things in ways that don't just solve for the quarter or even for the year or even for the next few, but actually are thinking about this in terms of decades and potentially even generations long, because that is what we're seeing when we don't address the breakdowns. Right? If we only think about things from a short-term perspective, we're not really looking at the impact of our behaviors and our choices, and we need to think about that certainly a lot more. In the same way that we're now shifting from thinking about this as only delivering for investors, whether those be shareholders or VCs or whoever, to thinking about this in terms of stakeholders. Stakeholders include, certainly investors, but also employees. They include partners. They include the community. And they include the environment. Of which it is that we're drawing resources from. So all those things are now being taken into consideration as we think about what the role of business is in this shifting society, and we take more responsibility for our actions, which then also puts more emphasis on the systemic biases that we've pushed under the rug for a long time and now become so incredibly visible and need to be addressed. And so whether those are racial or gender or many of the other ways in which we're going to try and become more sensitive, I think, to the way in which we have built structures in the past that are not necessarily always equitable, inclusive, or accessible for everyone. So that becomes another mandate of business to figure out how to address that differently. And then I think the one that we maybe are paying the most attention to, but we still don't really fully understand, is the calculus of exponential change. Right? These technologies are going to change the game dramatically. And they also escalate or hasten the rate of transformation. So with that, we will first hear from CEO of Belcorp. Belcorp is a Latin American beauty company. It is privately owned, but they have a huge footprint across Latin America, $1 billion in sales, and they are really working hard to create Belcorp, the 2.0 version. And it was fascinating to be able to work with them and to talk to their CEO about how she is trying to navigate this kind of change, because we often hear again that senior leaders are the key to this. So what does it mean to be in that position driving this forward?
Before we talked about being visionary and being bold and pushing people to this, but often when we start to ask people about what gets in the way, what are the hurdles, we get told, well, senior management doesn't believe, senior management isn't aligned, senior management doesn't give the resources, and they point the finger up, right? And so since you are sitting there in that position, I think it's interesting to get your perspective of what it feels like to be the visionary who sits at that position and has responsibility of trying to move the entire organization.
Well, I think in our case it's a bit different. I think in our case, the executive committee in general is very bought into it. And I think it's very bought into it because we're seeing significant changes in our context and in our business results. So that kind of created a sense of urgency for change. We also, before the pandemic, and what happened with the pandemic is that what we were seeing before kind of multiplied by 100. So what we were expecting to see, in 2 to 3 years, we started to see it in weeks. But it's not that we saw things dramatically different. It's that we saw things dramatically faster. The second thing was for us, with technology came e-commerce to LATAM. E-commerce was started growing even before the pandemic. With the pandemic, of course, accelerated dramatically. And then direct selling was not anymore a channel that was growing. People were moving to retail before the pandemic and to online. And we said, okay, now really the power is in the hands of the consumer, and the consumer has the right to buy whatever they want. So if we really want to sense what the consumer needs and respond to what the consumer needs, then we need to be in more than one channel. And that's when we decided as a company to be omni-channel and then to evolve direct selling. And actually more than evolve, we call it reinvent, because we didn't want to say we're digitalizing direct selling. We wanted to say we are creating a new digital business model. So we were doing already those changes. With the pandemic, we were forced to accelerate. So really the executive committee was bought into it. What we needed was to bring the organization along with us. And there we had like a mix of situations, because we had people that had been with us for many, 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 many years. And for them, we had the challenge of mindset, new ways of working, making them more curious of this new world. And we had some other capabilities that we didn't have and that we needed to bring. So we did a kind of a great mix on talent that had been in the company for a long time, and then new talent that could do 1 + 1 = 1,000,000. The executive committee is fully bought into it. Our challenge is more how we make it happen, how we know what we want, we're clear where we want to get to, how we make it happen to get there very fast. Because we do believe there's a window of opportunity. I mean, it's not having the digital relationship selling 10 years from now. We need to have it ASAP.
Right. And you have ambitious goals, right? So it's also just about trying to stay, relevant for the moment. I mean, there is this, an ambition where an organization wants to go, and it has this vision. It gets excited about that vision. So the question, I guess, then is, what are some of the hurdles that get in the way? So part of it is that there's a sustained way of we've done business this way, and people are very attached to it, and they are very proud of the success of the past, right? So reinterpreting that for the future and making them see that it is still carrying on, finding the right talent, right? Being attracting the right talent. Have you guys had any issues finding and attracting the people that you want, or is the market open?
No, I think going back to your question, and then I'll just double click on talent. One of the biggest challenges that we have is that we've been doing the business in the same way with incremental changes, but in basically the same way for 53 years. So that brings two things. One is a bit of fear of changing. I mean, is it going to work? Are we sure? If we've done it this way for 53 years, why we're going to do it differently because it has worked? So one thing is fear for changing, and what will happen if we change too fast or if we change in the wrong direction. And I would say the second thing is, that's the only way we know how to do it. So we need to learn new ways on how to do it. And then, so those I would say are the two big changes. And maybe a third one was risk taking. In the past, if you would take a risk, the risk of not doing it right was huge. So we needed to change the mindset of the people that let's test small. We're not going to move the transatlantic like this fully. We just want to make test. Let's test this idea with these customers, with these consumers, with these consultants. And if it doesn't work, it's not a big deal. In the past, the way of doing it is whatever decision you take, the impact of not doing it right was too big. So our challenge is how we reduce the impact of failing so that people decide to take more risk. That we still, and in talent, we said, okay, there are some skills that we do have, or skills or experiences, and there are some others that we do not. And we felt we needed to get into a reskilling effort, but we didn't have the time for everything to depend on reskilling. We needed some expertise to bring it much faster than what we could reskill. And then, okay, what is the type of talent that we need? The biggest driver of people long-term success was their learning agility capability. Their learning agility score. So we said, okay, what we need is to hire people that have the expertise, but also people that have a very high learning agility.
And there was another CEO, a friend of mine, who was transforming his team or had a big management shift. There was people that were moving, and he was trying to figure out who should be where. And I'm like, it's not about how much experience they have. It really is about their ability to adapt.
So that, to your question, while we were looking in the talent, we were looking for learning agility. And learning agility has embedded curiosity.
Yes.
And then the third one I was looking, and this is more because of my background, I come from a very diverse family in nationalities, in styles, in careers. And I am a strongly believer on diversity. So I would say those are the kind of the hurdles that we had and a bit of what have we done in talent.
Well, these are all hit on the things that we talk about that are really crucial for being able to build both the capacity and the mindset to be able to move forward. So when you think about the systems that, I guess if you had a magic wand and there was something that would make your work easier, right, and being able to move this work faster, is it external that somehow you wish that the regulation would be lifted, or that markets would be more open, or that currencies would be whatever, or is it more internal about what it is that you would want to be able to do to move faster?
I think would be internal, and I think would be the ways of working. I think would be how we kind of remove barriers so that the organization can move much faster and seamless, how we empower more, how we inspire people to think outside of the box, to be more curious, to think that extraordinary things can happen. So I think would be more internal than external.
So then I think about, okay, even on an internal basis, there's structures inside the organization, and then there's the individual themselves. Like when I think about, this idea of being agile or adaptive, it's also self-awareness and what it is I need to learn about myself. So how much of the work is about structural barriers inside the organization? How much is personal development for the team?
I think it's both. I would say it's half and half. I think it's both. I think parties are on the organization, on the processes, on the systems, but I think there's also a big part on each individual and how each individual approaches the work.
This has been great. I just love talking to people who are actually doing it. Like I can read about it, and I can preach about it, and I can zoom in and zoom out of meetings like I got to do with your team. But being in it and doing it every day is a very different thing.
I love the way that Erika frames this. So you're going to hear this conversation over and over if you watch the whole series around risk-taking and fear and being able to figure out how to constrain it so that we're able to actually move forward and not be locked into so many of the, again, processes and ways of thinking and holding things of the past. Again, the playbook is dead. And the reason we call it a playbook is because there were a certain set of practices that we were taught, or certain processes, I guess, that we were taught. And actually, I think we're moving to a set of much more fluid practices, not so much about rules, but around ways of thinking that allow us to be able to, as she said, sense and respond more effectively in real time. And what's really raises an interesting question about what's currently missing from our approach. In 2010, the Wall Street Journal wrote an article about that management was dead at the end of management. And they pointed to so many of the things that we can point to now, 11 years later, that are no longer working. And the way that they described it is that organizations at that point, or our approach to building them, had been really designed to be bureaucratic. Like it was intentionally designed that way so that we could, again, scale effectively and grow global brands around the world and ensure that all the tasks were done as efficiently as possible. And again, based on these shifts, those things are no longer working. And we're seeing that witnessed by several different kind of breakdowns. One is a decreasing relevance for our organizations. There are some who believe that half the companies in the S&P 500 will cease to be included in 10 years. BCG did some research early in the year before the pandemic and said that they forecast that 1 out of 3 public companies would cease to exist in its current form over the next 5 years. And the key to that is in its current form. There's really, again, this mandate for transformation and to do it quickly, as Erika described. We're also seeing shifting roles, right? Whether or not the CMO even exists in organizations anymore, as that role has become so much more complex and broken into so many different kinds of talents and skills and expressions. So, does it really get huddled in that way anymore? And a polarizing profitability, which we will hear about a little bit more in the next interview that we do. But again, the BCG studies show that there is this growing gap between those at the front end who can really harness this technology and this opportunity that exists right now, and those who are still waiting for it to feel real or trying to understand how it impacts them. And that gap is larger than it's been in 30 years. So the question again is, how do we navigate our way through that, and what is it that's going to be coming toward us? So we get to hear now from Carl Horton, who is an associate partner with IBM, an enterprise strategy, specifically around customer engagement and loyalty, and through the deployment of artificial intelligence applications and systems. So it's interesting to see his point of view and kind of what works and what doesn't.
How do you define your role these days? What are you up to?
Sure. I'm an associate partner at IBM in a group called Enterprise Strategy. And our role is to partner with clients, and we all have our own specialties. Mine is customer transformation, and really understanding their needs and to be able to create an experience that's going to be engaging, personalized, that will drive emotional loyalty, and obviously incremental transactions and long-term customer lifetime value. People want their brands now to be aligned with their values. And so sustainability might be the value for you. Others, it's other aspects of sustainability, whether it's electric cars, whether it is minimum, you're paying your people and treating your staff well, and they're empowered. There's so many different definitions of values, but they're expecting it to be aligned with their particular values.
Right. And so somehow, again, it's the world that we're heading toward technologically that makes it visible that those are the values that matter to me, and that they end up showing up in some way in which you're delivering this particular experience or content. The BCG study said that 1 out of 3 public companies would cease to exist in its current form in the next 5 years. And the part that I always emphasize is in its current form, right? That transformative part is so important. But they also saw a profitability gap between the front end and the back end that was continuing to grow. So when you see folks at the front end who really get this versus those who are lagging, how would you paint sort of the picture of the difference between the two?
The difference I would paint is, honestly, I think there are 3 fundamental things. One is they put the customer at the center of it all, so that they design their experiences and their engagement with the customer in mind and what is frictionless for the customer. 2, they really put personalization as a critical step towards managing that experience. And then lastly is a culture of continuous learning and a culture of an innovators culture, willing to try different visions, beta test it. The things that don't work, it's okay to fail. The things that do work, let's scale them. And often I feel like the companies that are failing are the ones like, well, this is the way we've always done it, or this is the experience that we believe and we're projecting onto the customer, and aren't doing the analysis to say, how do I evolve that experience to really meet their needs?
What is a project that you've been most excited about, whether it's most recent or even a few years back, where you really saw, again, people willing to walk away from a playbook and really willing to embrace a different way of doing things? Like, what is something that you can use as a inspiring tale to others, whether you want to name their company or not?
Right. Well, I've just finished a project with a very large medical company that has both a pharmaceutical side and a medical equipment side. And what's really exciting is their understanding of the need to evolve with their customer. They've got multiple brands, which meant they have multiple websites and multiple user experiences. And the understanding that when they're selling into a hospital or a physician's office, that physician has to work through 5 different websites to be able to get their product. So they're now putting their client or their customer to center to revamp their e-commerce experience, become a lot more like Amazon, to have improved order management, being able to track their shipping, one password across all the sites, which will then also drive profitability, because so much, 50 to 60% of their time of their call center and of their sales reps is not spent selling, but spent servicing and finding out where's my order.
Oh, wow.
So much productivity because of how antiquated their e-commerce experience is. And then some of the things we talked about in terms of operating model, they understand that they just can't change the website. They've got to modernize and evolve their operating model to be able to work fast and be able to align with the speed of doing business.
So as we start to adopt better practices and more thoughtfulness around this, and even just more confidence around this, like how do you help educate folks on how to do this well?
This is a great opportunity. This is a great time to be alive, right? So, the components I would talk about AI is it's being more and more integrated across an organization. So it's gone from sort of being in a corner in a tech-heavy area to being fundamentally altering everything about the operations of a business, and it's becoming more and more easier to build and manage. So therefore, it's only going to become more integrated.
We are no longer, we shouldn't be using industrial language. So when people talk about that we're heading into a fourth industrial revolution, I just think that is such a misnomer. It doesn't help us understand how to prepare differently. Yes. What I describe as a productivity revolution. Yes. Right? Exponential technologies will allow us to build productivity in such different ways. Absolutely. And at such a different scale. Yes. And it has all kinds of impact on organizational structure around that, and the potential to actually be more distributed in so much of either the way that we work or the way that we are structuring our entire organization. The challenge when you think about productivity, though, and you talk about the ability to do this, is what happens with talent, what happens with employees. So as you bring some of these digital tools or capacities into an organization, yes. How does it happen with the people that are the ones who used to take the orders and now maybe a machine is doing it?
No, it's a great question. I think there are two real paths that I've seen. One is getting people out of the humdrum, repetitive roles and being able to put them into value-added roles where, let's say, they're engaging directly with customers or other value-added activities.
And the part that I always I'm scratching my head around is people want everything to stay exactly the way it is, and yet when you look at the Gallup studies, 70 to 80% of the people are not engaged in their work. Right. Why would we want to continue that? Right? Like that, just from a societal level, that doesn't feel good, right? That leads to all kinds of other problems where people are dissatisfied and take it out in other ways. But it's also about the fact that we need that cognitive capacity. We need people to be creative and to think, to your point about the local. So in my world, I describe it as we're moving from a playbook to a set of practices. Yes. So we have a way of being able to respond. We have confidence in our ability to be able to sense and respond. That makes it so it doesn't feel so scary that I'm going to be caught off guard, right? And another way we think about it is that you're moving from having a map to having a compass. What are some of the ways that you help people think about this idea? If you're letting go of that old plan, what am I replacing it with?
Yeah, I'd say a mix of business rules, increased integration, and increased employee empowerment.
So what are the other pieces of advice that we could give to people about how to break things down so that they can actually move faster in moments where the opportunity suddenly presents itself?
Right. So often we talk about technology in terms of moving faster, and I think you're dead on in terms of operating model, especially being in loyalty and customer experience design. That is one of the things that I push is being able to have what we call intelligent workflow and an operating model that aligns with what your needs are. Breaking those walls down and aligning incentives and aligning objectives. That's why I slipped in there with the ability to fail, because people love to say, fail fast and let's try different things. But culturally, you get ostracized if your pilot fails and the person whose pilot succeeded becomes a rock star, even though neither one of you knew whose was going to be successful.
Right. And that's another place where we go back to this idea of moving away from incremental improvement to actually audacious and bold improvement. Because, it's easier to win that pilot when you've made this much of an improvement in something.
Yes.
Right. It's much harder when you've done it, when you're trying to do this. But the gains, if you're able to do this, are so much greater. And so the good news is that hopefully we've got teams that are working on both. Right. But at the same time, they should be equally respected. All right, my friend. Well, best of luck.
Best of luck to you. I'm impressed that you found the time and the energy to share your insights in such a formal way through a book. And here to you.
I love what both Carl and Erica are pointed to as we think about what the future needs and expects of us. It's one of the key questions that I ask as we learn to navigate new terrain and let go of this old playbook that told us there was a certain way in which we were supposed to do things, and instead figure out sort of this new ability to sense and respond. There's actually another component to this, though. When we think about what it is that is missing in current or modern leadership, right? There's often this sort of framing about what it's supposed to look like, and it starts with thinking about this beyond just being a professional. We aren't just bodies that are going to work every day. There were also humans that are going through these transitions. We're sons and daughters and mothers and fathers and community members, and if anything, that's become more and more visible in the last year than maybe ever before. And increasingly, we're being asked to think about this as a member of society, which makes our actions that much more important, right? Well, we need to take more responsibility for the things that we activate or create or do. And so this is part of what makes the future so extraordinary, but part of what makes the playbook so irrelevant is that it is scale and scope and speed simultaneously. And we need a new way of being able to orient to that. One of the things that I opened the book with are two stories about what I think that the future needs and expects in terms of leadership. And the first is the sense of being bold and visionary. We talk about Amazon's headquarters in Seattle called the Spheres, and how that just absolutely challenges all expectations or sort of known preconceptions about what a corporate real estate or headquarters is supposed to look like. And it was built in record time, and just again sort of shocks you when you get to see these very futuristic looking buildings in the middle of downtown Seattle. And they've just now announced their design for their new or their second headquarters in Virginia, which again pushes all our expectations of what we think it should look like or could look like, and sets a really aspirational vision, which is important, right? Being bold and visionary and aspirational is critical. But there's a second part, and it has to do with being caring and putting humans at the center, not just customers at the center, and thinking about this again through those three lenses. So when we start to imagine what a future could look like that is more caring, there's a story we also tell about women at the airport. If you ever heard my keynote talks, you've often heard me talk about them. But it's the idea of being able to see a person that was in need, somebody who had a situation going on that they weren't able to manage at that moment alone, and recognizing that there was something that these other women that witnessed that could bring to the story. I won't give you the whole thing now, but the idea is that there are moments where I think increasingly we're going to see that there is an ability to empower people to be able to feel as though they can take action and not feel as though they need to consult, or that there's a handbook that tells them exactly how to do it, or that it gives them permission, that they recognize that they have the, again, the skills, the resources, the capacities, the agency to act in a moment where it is that they are really needed. And they come together and they do something and they pull apart. There's just a different physics to what it means to be able to sense and respond in real time, which is a really, really critical approach as we move forward. So part of that is being deeply aware of what's going on around you and being really curious. And so we will dive into that tomorrow as we go into wonder versus resist. We'll hear some pretty startling statistics from my friend Stephen Kotler about how quickly the world is transforming and why it is important that we dive in and understand that, and what are the resources that we can get to doing that, and how we actually incentivize that inside our organizations. So thanks for joining us on this ride through leadering, and I hope you enjoy the next section. Bye.